Muy buenos días a todas y todos. Les damos una cordial bienvenida a la actividad Desarrollo de Campus Universitario en el siglo XXI, la que se enmarca en el proyecto de Plan Maestro del Campus Chillán. La actividad, organizada por Dirección General del Campus y el equipo asesor del Plan Maestro, compuesto por representantes de todos los estamentos de nuestra universidad, busca ampliar e integrar miradas internacionales sobre conceptualizaciones acerca del desarrollo de ciudades universitarias. Es por lo anterior que agradecemos su presencia y deseamos que sea una jornada muy provechosa. Antes de iniciar la actividad, saludamos a las autoridades que nos acompañan. Al rector de nuestra universidad, doctor Carlos Saavedra Rovilar, al director general del Campus Chillán, doctor Pedro Pablo Rojas García, a las y los decanos de las distintas facultades del campus, al decano de la Facultad de Arquitectura, Urbanismo y Geografía de nuestra Casa de Estudios, el doctor Leonel Pérez Bustamante, al subdirector del Campus Chillán, doctor Daniel Sandoval Silva, a la presidenta de la Federación de Estudiantes, señorita Francisca Leito, a los jefes y jefas de carrera, directoras y directores de departamentos, académicas y académicos, funcionarias y funcionarios, representantes de sindicatos, a los miembros del equipo asesor del Plan Maestro, a la comunidad estudiantil que hoy nos acompaña y un saludo especial a nuestro invitado en esta jornada, el doctor Lucas Griffith. El Plan Maestro del Campus Chillán corresponde a una de las 5 ideas de progreso expresadas por el rector Carlos Saavedra Rovilar en su discurso con motivo del centenario de la Universidad de Concepción. En dicha oportunidad destacó que el Plan Maestro permitirá definir el crecimiento académico y de infraestructura requeridos para las próximas décadas, proyectando a nuestra universidad hacia el futuro, contribuyendo con ello además al desarrollo de la región de Ñuble. Es así como la subetapa de la fase 1, denominada Nuestro Futuro, se ha desarrollado durante los meses de julio y septiembre, llevando a cabo distintas instancias participativas, desde talleres, entrevistas y presentaciones a toda la comunidad universitaria, con el objetivo de conocer las opiniones, sueños y visiones de futuro que tienen del Campus Chillán. Bajo este marco, hoy llevaremos a cabo la actividad Desarrollo de Campus Universitario en el siglo XXI, la que busca aportar una nueva mirada sobre el concepto de ciudad universitaria a través de la presentación del Dr. Lucas Griffith de la Universidad de California en Davis. A continuación, invitamos al rector Dr. Carlos Saavedra Rovilar a que entregue un saludo.
Estimadas y estimados integrantes de la comunidad universitaria del Campus Chillán, han pasado años desde que el predio donde actualmente se encuentra nuestra universidad en la ciudad de Chillán, la Quinta Agrícola, se convirtiera en una sede universitaria regional. Con el Plan Maestro de los años 50, se configura el trazado actual del campus. Pero este año 2021, un nuevo Plan Maestro comienza a gestarse, con la participación de todos los estamentos desde la propia comunidad del Campus Chillán. Este nuevo plan no solo abordará los desafíos de infraestructura necesarios para los requerimientos actuales de docencia e investigación, sino que pretende proyectar a la comunidad UdeC de Chillán y de la región del Ñuble hacia la construcción de una nueva ciudad universitaria, con desarrollos propios y proyectos que permitan a sus integrantes de hoy y mañana alcanzar un crecimiento insospechado hasta ahora. Este ciclo de charlas, y en especial la exposición denominada Desarrollo de Campus Universitario en el siglo XXI, nace como una propuesta del equipo compuesto por representantes de todos los estamentos del campus y busca proporcionar una mirada de universidades de campus para el desarrollo de distintas dimensiones, tales como docencia, investigación, innovación, emprendimiento, vinculación con el medio, gestión estratégica e infraestructura. Para esto, hemos invitado al director de planificación de campus de la Universidad de California en Davis, Estados Unidos, para que nos cuente sobre su experiencia en la planificación espacial, el diseño y cómo esto armoniza con el compromiso hacia la comunidad. Actualmente se encuentra liderando las iniciativas estratégicas de operación y administración del nuevo Plan de Desarrollo a largo plazo para el campus de la ciudad de Davis, considerando las variables del cambio climático, por lo que sus propuestas incluyen el desarrollo sustentable. Su visión es crear un campus como un lugar preciado para la comunidad, un panorama y un refugio que otorga perspectiva. La invitación es entonces aprovechar la charla, reflexionar sobre sus temáticas y rescatar las experiencias que pudieran contribuir a nuestro proceso de planificación del Campus Chillán UdeC. Somos una comunidad que crece, que cree en sus integrantes y que liderará los escenarios del siglo XXI de esta ciudad. Muchas gracias.
Agradecemos las palabras de nuestro rector, Dr. Carlos Saavedra Rubilar. El Dr. Lucas Griffith es director de planificación de la UC Davis, experto en planificación espacial, diseño urbano y participación comunitaria. Cuenta con un doctorado en filosofía en seguridad social y gestión de riesgos enfocados en planificación urbana de la Universidad de Stavanger en Noruega. Trabaja en iniciativas estratégicas para guiar las operaciones y la administración del paisaje y las carreras del campus en Davis, a través de la incertidumbre del cambio climático y las tecnologías de transporte emergentes. A continuación, invitamos al Dr. Lucas Griffith a desarrollar su presentación. También indicar que nos acompaña el director general del campus, Dr. Pedro Pablo Rojas García, y el decano de la Facultad de Arquitectura, Urbanismo y Geografía de nuestra Casa de Estudios, el Dr. Leonel Pérez Bustamante, quienes al finalizar la presentación realizarán algunas preguntas. Sin más, iniciamos la actividad Desarrollo de Campus Universitario en el siglo XXI con la ponencia del Dr. Lucas.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Gracias por la oportunidad hoy. It's an honor. Thank you for reaching out. Today, I'm going to share my screen and walk you through a series of things we do here at UC Davis. But first, a quick outline for what we might get into today. There's really three main parts in the beginning. But I'll set some context. We'll go into what I call planning for resiliency, talking about place and place matters, culture, stewardship, and then some closing thoughts for us to share. So a little bit about me. Yo soy de San Francisco, California, y ahora trabajo a la Universidad Davis. I've been the director of campus planning for 8 years here. I come to my profession as a landscape architect, an urban designer, and a city planner. My education is here. You see master's and bachelor's in landscape architecture from UC Davis and UC Berkeley, and most recently my doctorate from Norway, the University of Stavanger. And for them in Scandinavia, planning is actually considered societal safety and risk management. So it's, I think, a very appropriate given climate change and what we face today. And then some context around UC Davis. It is one of 10 university campuses for the UC system. We're the one to the north, the most. And on the right, you see UC Davis and the various satellite campuses that we have. We have a bodega, marine laboratory. We have environmental research in the Tahoe Sierras. And really a diversity of collections across the state. The University of Davis has 4 colleges, so College of Agricultural and Environmental Sciences, College of Engineering, College of Biosciences, College of Letters and Sciences, 6 professional schools with medical school, a nursing school, veterinary medicine, education, law, and business. About 35,000 undergraduate students. You can see the numbers here. It's a fairly large institution and a very, both in terms of budget and scale of acres. About 10 million square feet of buildings, and about 10,000 students living on campus. So when I began here my job was to do the long-range development plan. It's, I think, akin to a master plan. And it really is to guide the future for the university in Davis. Everything else outside of Davis was not part of this planning effort and is not necessarily my responsibility. But here you see the blue hue is UC Davis, and our neighbor and our partner in many ways is the municipality, the city of Davis. Out of the 10 UCs, Berkeley, UCLA, UC San Diego, UC Davis is the only one that's really a small college town in a very large agricultural setting. So Xi'an might be a similar context. So as I began this process, we really looked at it from resiliency, and we can explain or describe more what we mean by that, but it really was trying to make the mission, the academic mission, relevant in the 21st century. I appreciate some of the approach that you all are taking towards your 21st century university, and trying to be relevant and impactful so that we make the world a better place. So we began this in really 2015, and it took us 3 years to put this plan together. We started with principles. We have to know the vision, right? And the first and foremost is the academic enterprise. And for us, that really is three things. It's education and teaching. It's also innovation and research and exploration of new knowledge. And then all of those things for public betterment and societal benefit. But in addition to the academic mission, we also have two other kind of principles that we emphasize in our efforts. And one of them is community. So much of what we do happens outside of the classroom or the laboratory. And we wanted to honor that and celebrate it, from housing to recreational sport to art. The third one is creating a sustainable future. I think everybody here understands the importance of that, but really trying to do the work that it takes to have a more sustainable and equitable society. So we took those principles and looked at our main campus, began to explore how those would map in. So to orient you, we've got, this is about 3,000 acres in total, with Interstate 80. This is a major highway that goes all the way from San Francisco to New York. It's a long drive though. And then a smaller state highway that separates what we call the central campus from more of the agricultural areas. But we took those principles and we had to map them into those locales through land use. And one of the challenges we always have with maps in general, but also land use maps, is they look like abstract art. And many people who are not trained professionals in this have a hard time decoding this and getting into what the content is. So we worked very hard on ways to make this information more accessible, and came up with something called, what we called the infographic, where it really put some big labels on the map. You know, in dark blue outlines is really the core research functions. And then the yellow neighborhood functions, and really tried to use this regularly and frequently so that we could walk the community through what we were looking at. Excuse me. And on the right, you'll see some of the variables that we used. The main one really starting with student enrollment, and from that rising tide, what other boats would lift with that water. So as undergraduate population comes up, then your graduate student population comes up because they help teach and serving as teachers' assistants. And you need more faculty to steward and mentor those graduate students. Then you need more staff to support those faculty. You might need some more academic space. And for this particular plan we had a lot of outreach and engagement around housing. And I'll share more about that. one of the outreach efforts that we did, I'm very proud of, was we took a building on campus and dedicated it to the formal outreach and engagement, and set up an exhibit that you would find in a museum per se, where this was about 30 exhibits from an introduction about the 21st century campus through public space and around the corner to housing, and then back again towards sustainability and infrastructure and carbon neutrality. We held a lot of workshops in there, engaging our community about what they value, what were the challenges they faced. If we built more housing, what would they need it to do? And again, we started with our base year, about 33,000 students, and projected a modest growth in enrollment. But we did a very ambitious growth for housing, almost doubled our housing. And really that grew out of a variety of things, but it's probably the most sustainable thing that we could do. We knew in the future there's a lot of uncertainty around transportation and modes of transit, but we knew that people would more or less be the same size and they would need housing. So we thought that was tremendously valuable, and amplifying their time on campus would allow for more engagement, more interaction, more spontaneity that would ultimately lead to learning outcomes and innovation. This is a diagram of our West Village. It's a 10, 15-year-old zero net energy residential neighborhood. It's about 250 acres and currently houses about 6,000 students. And planning, we have not built the faculty and staff housing yet. That's coming next. But this part in yellow was part of the plan, and just 3 weeks ago, 3,300 students moved into brand new housing. It was the largest student housing project in our country, about $500 million, and it's all zero net energy. It's pretty impressive. I think it's going to be quite a legacy for the university. But one of the important parts of sustainability is really the infrastructure, in addition to housing. And I typically group these at a really high level with regards to energy and water. Those are the two kind of critical pieces. And for us, being part of the UC, we have obligations to hit our carbon neutrality goals, to reduce our water use, but also to reduce our waste and our transportation. One of the things that UC Davis is quite distinct because of is our bike culture. We have an incredible bicycle network and a population that really embraces it. If you think about a flat landscape, a relatively young population, the bicycle is perfect. And so you'll see on our campus, out of those 50,000 people who come to campus every day, 46% ride the bicycle from home. And a fair amount of them also take the bus. This is a picture of our Unitrans. It's a student-run transit system, and it's kind of remarkable. Some bright-eyed students back in the 70s went to London, bought 2 double-decker buses, shipped them back, and began a student-led transit system here that's still here today, and it has an incredible ridership. And we only have 24% that drive to campus, but those 24% live on average about 30 miles from campus. This is an image of their home residence kind of mapped kind of like a rain cloud. And here's UC Davis in the middle. And how these people travel, on Interstate 80 or State Route 113 becomes really important for us to consider as we think about climate change and greenhouse gases. But we don't want to build parking. If we built a parking structure, it would probably be obsolete in 10 years, as soon as the future lands with autonomous vehicles, with mobilities that are emerging from Lyft and Uber and shared systems, to shared bicycle systems, to technologies around electric assist bicycles, electric scooters, everything micro-transit. There's all of these uncertainties around it. And again, we knew if we built parking, it probably would be underutilized in 10 years while we still had mortgage or debt associated with that structure. This is a little bit of a transition from the planning aspects of the long-range development plan. But one of the things that we pride ourselves on here is UC Davis and many institutions of higher education are place-based, in that they have a place. They have a civic core, just like a downtown would have a civic core or a civic center. And these places are what compels people to come and research and study. So not losing sight of that, I think, is very important. And our long-range development plan put objectives in and principles in towards this, but in the end, you need to articulate the physical space, the built environment, loosely to make sure that it is preserved moving forward. But these things are very, very nuanced, from the dappled light that shines through a tree to the fall color of the leaves. This is an example, a series of slides about this concept we illustrated in 2009. And this was our main library, still is today. And then to the west, this notion of an axial promenade for people, with a student community center, some classroom functions, a bus terminal here for the Unitrans, and then a larger open space and some buildings around it to the west. So we diagrammed it. It became a project. We had architects draw it up and talk about the appurtenances and the composition of the public space and the relationship to the buildings. The buildings frame these spaces. And just this week, I took this picture. It's vibrant. It's such a treat to see the students back, enjoying the connections with each other. There's kind of a calmness to it, that and a deep appreciation that you can feel out there after the last 20 months that we've all been through. One of the things that I think is quite distinct with how we do campus planning at UC Davis, and I'm happy to learn more about others and how they approach it. The group that I am a part of, campus planning and environmental stewardship, includes 5 units. So campus planning, environmental planning, sustainability, and then transportation services and the arboretum and public garden. These last 2 functions really maintain the outdoors of the campus. It is essentially the campus minus the buildings. Everything outside the window is within our management, within our stewardship. And so we do long-range planning, and then every day we have hundreds of people tending the garden. And one of the most important things that we believe, as you think about the significance of place and the relevancy of a campus, is its trees, its forest, the living landscape. And I'm very proud to share with you our living landscape adaptation plan. This has been in the works for 3 years. I haven't printed it yet, but it's basically ready to print. And it's our response to climate change, which is quite significant. We've developed 5 strategies that really try to address climate change straight ahead, And I'll walk you through some of them, but some of them are quite obvious, from sustain a thriving tree canopy and urban forest, preserve and enhance biodiversity and the ecosystem functions, and make sure you have a clean, resilient water supply. Pieces that are a little bit more nuanced that I think are quite interesting are the health and community engagement pieces. This is our climatic kind of context of what we historically have known at Davis and what we inherited in a way. It's maybe somewhat similar to what you experienced in Chile. I think we both share they call a Mediterranean climate. And in the 50s and 60s, we played with it. We planted redwoods from the coast of California. We gave them water, and they thrived in the deep soil. But with climate change, these trees are not thriving. We're faced with a fairly significant challenge looking ahead. 40 more days of extreme heat, severe drought, forest and tree die-off, reduced water reliability. These are real challenges. And if you are near sea level rise is a very real challenge as well. And for our forest, which has massive implications for not just the quality of the experience of the campus, but even the energy uses of buildings and the performance of buildings in relationship to the shade that trees provide. We assessed our tree canopy and found that perhaps half of our canopy was actually at risk of climate change. But we also know our climate ready tree canopy is leveraging future climate. So we've done research. We've gone to Mexico to collect acorns from oak trees in hotter climates, which is the way we're headed. And we've brought them back and planted them and are looking at how well they're doing. We've gone to Texas and collected trees from hotter climates. And we're leveraging our own oak collection in the Arboretum, which is one of the most diverse oak collections in the world. And through all of that, we really wanted to emphasize the health, not just for the forests and the ecosystem, but actually for the health and well-being of our community. We're leveraging the notion of something called Nature RX, which is like a doctor prescribing you a walk in the forest. This is something that has a massive benefit for your mental well-being. And students under regular times have stress from class. And in the pandemic, we have found our public realm to be more activated and more beneficial to the community than ever. We also have found that it's a really empowering process to address climate change, to provide students an opportunity to discuss it and to actually make a meaningful impact and change. It is something that gives them relief as well, and a sense of agency. Sometimes climate change can be debilitating. For us, kind of wrapping up, we go back to our own principles of community, which is how we really show up to our community, how we embrace each other, we confront and reject any manifestation of discrimination, reject violence, we strive for equity, and try to understand potential impacts, disproportionate, to make sure that we are making the world a better place and empowering the next generation to address the challenges that they have. So in closing, I just wanted to encourage you and celebrate the work that you do, is to let your program lead, right? The pursuit of knowledge, the academic program is paramount. And that has never been my job here at UC Davis. I asked the professors, the deans, the chancellors, what is the vision? And we make sure that we provide enough space for that to occur. Consider all the scales, the temporal and spatial scales that are coming at us, anticipate the future climate. For you, it might be different. For us, it's extreme weather, drought, fire, heat. Consider the shifts in societal structures, whether it's market technologies and transportation or different types of economies. And stick with what we always know will work. Housing is a basic human right. Agriculture and access to food and water are critical. How we provide energy must be addressed. If you can, embrace the bicycle. It's an incredible invention. Don't need to do much else besides that. And always puts a smile on your face. And then celebrate the community in place. All of the community and the places you have. Those are your assets. Those are your people. Those are your places. May they flourish. And if I may provide any other information for you, you're welcome to come to my office website, and most of this information is here under these various tabs. But I wanted to just thank you for your time today and the opportunity to share what we do. If it's a value, I hope it is. If you want to talk more or have any questions for me, I am here for you. And maybe one day, maybe give you a campus tour if you were to come here, or if I came down there with my family, you could give me a tour.
Agradecemos la presentación realizada por el Dr. Lucas Griffith y ahora daremos paso a algunas preguntas por parte del director del campus, Dr. Pedro Pablo Rojas, y el decano de la FAUC, Dr. Leonel Pérez. Director, decano, bienvenidos. Director, bueno, lo invito para realizar algunas consultas al doctor Lucas.
Bien, muchas gracias, Paul. Primero, agradecer la fantástica presentación del profesor Lucas. Ha sido muy ilustrativo respecto de la planificación del campus, de un campus universitario. Maravilloso tener la experiencia de que él comparta esos conocimientos con nosotros. Eso es lo primero. Y quisiera plantear, dado que podrían emerger algunas consultas, varias consultas, quisiera destacar o englobar en una de ellas, quizás para reforzar algunas ideas, y preguntarle al profesor Lucas, desde su experiencia, ¿qué ámbitos son primordiales al momento de diseñar un plan maestro para un campus universitario? Y como segunda pregunta, dejarla ya planteada, es desde qué ámbito es pertinente abordar el desarrollo sustentable para el diseño de un campus universitario. En esas dos preguntas quisiera enfocarme para recibir el conocimiento del profesor Lucas. Muchas gracias.
I think for me, the critical piece when addressing a master plan is vision. And I think understanding what the program is that you're planning for. I think I've heard agronomy, I've heard health. I think those things are, what you lead with. From a physical planning perspective, which is distinctly different from program, it's the built form and thinking about the spaces you're making, right? The buildings are critical to support that program. But then there is the outdoor, and that is the experience of the campus. And thinking about that in today's world, I think is interesting, but it has always been a significant part of the campus. So my approach to design and urban design has always been mobility. How does one experience and arrive, and the thresholds that you pass on that arrival sequence to ultimately sitting in your seat for class or doing the work that you do, is think about the human experience from home to office. I think is a nice approach for how I do it. I think you can think about it from streets to promenades to pathways. and the relationships between those buildings and the spaces that they're making. But obviously, I'm not an architect. There's a lot in architecture that is critical to understanding the built form and what it's doing to support that program and that mission.
Muchas gracias.
La segunda consulta, sí, la puede realizar director nuevamente para que aparezca aquí en la plataforma.
Perfecto. Planteaba la segunda pregunta, tenía relación desde qué ámbito es pertinente abordar el desarrollo sustentable para el diseño de un campus universitario.
I think sustainable development means a lot of different things to people. I think from a physical aspect of it, physics, I think it is, I said earlier, thinking about your water, from your drinking water to your sanitary waters to your stormwater and flooding and extreme weather. All of the waters are connected. They're all one. So I encourage you to think about them holistically as one water system. And on energy, same. Thinking about energy from, are you going to have coal, gas, solar, wind, hydro? Those are the pieces. And I'd say those are fairly straightforward. We have so much technology now to leverage. I think you will do well on those two fronts. Say the piece that I like to bring into sustainability is equity. We're trying to save ourselves in this world so that all of us can thrive. And that really is an equity question about taking care of each other and all of us, and then making sure that others are not left out and they all have opportunities. So to me, that's true sustainability. So you can think about it from sometimes people talk about the 4 E's. You've got the environmental sustainability, you've got the economic sustainability, you've got the educational sustainability, because higher ed is critical to making the better world. And then the equity and ethics are a critical part to it.
Decano, por favor. Muchas gracias. Doctor Lucas, decano, por favor.
Sí, gracias, Lucas. Como arquitecto y planificador, creo que he disfrutado mucho de tu presentación. Ha sido muy, muy, muy completa y muy mezclando muchos aspectos de la planificación. Quería plantear 2 preguntas. La primera, es si tú crees que existe un modelo de campus en Estados Unidos, y si es que existen algunas diferencias significativas entre los campus universitarios, por ejemplo, de la costa este o oeste. Creo que esa es una duda que quizás pudiera iluminarnos en nuestro trabajo. Gracias.
Thank you. This is an interesting question. One of the things that I'm aware of that's the unique contributions from campus planning in the Americas is the kind of opening up of campus. And by that, historically in the European models, the universities were walled and kind of enclosed. But in North America, in the late 1800s, those campuses opened up one wall to the city and created an open campus. And so that kind of public space and that connections probably most dramatically illustrated at Berkeley during the free speech movement. That is a pretty profound contribution, I say. And it might also be similar in South America, I'm not sure. As far as West Coast and East Coast in the United States, there's some climatic influences that are fairly significant. Also the most of the United States began on the East Coast and slowly moved west. The big distinction, I think, between campuses in our country is their mission. There's a lot of private institutions, smaller campuses, health campuses. For UC Davis, we are something called a land grant institution, which is a grant out of the Morrow Act that was signed into law by President Lincoln in the 1860s, that took public lands and made them available for research and education. Most of the land grant institutions are large campuses that focused historically on agriculture and the mechanical arts. So Texas A&M, UC Berkeley is actually a land grant institution. And it really is an interesting legacy. It is the democratization of higher education, where the intent was to make education accessible to all people. And so the government could put public lands towards that end. That's a very different mission than other institutions, whether they be public but not land grant or private. So that often has a pretty significant impact on how a campus is developed over time.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias. Tenía otra consulta también, Lucas. Te has referido en parte a ello. En Latinoamérica, durante el siglo XX, hubo un concepto que rigió los campus, que se llamó el modelo de ciudad universitaria. En México, en Caracas, en Tucumán, Argentina. ¿Crees tú que el modelo de campus anglosajón o la experiencia norteamericana son compatibles con esa cultura del campus norteamericano? ¿Qué potencialidades ves en esa mezcla de experiencias?
This is, I think, a really interesting question. I would like to actually almost have more of a longer discussion about what it is. I think I would be hesitant to say, Latin America university cities are one thing, right? I think each city is a distinct entity and has its own culture. The Anglo-Saxon piece is also interesting in today's world, in particular. For us, something that we've been really looking squarely at over the last 20 months has been equity. And this question, I might be getting this completely wrong, but it reminds me of what we've gone through with the George Floyd incident here in the United States, and the tidal wave that we have for social justice, racial equality. Anytime I hear Anglo-Saxon, it makes me think of all of those things that we have inherited in the world. And I'm proud to be working here at UC Davis. I think we have finally written and have a land acknowledgement statement for our campus, which has a very deep history. Before European settlement, it was actually a Native American settlement and a village site. And so for me, this question makes me want to go back to indigenous histories and rights and equity, to think about going beyond and really back to the mission of why we have education, to really have that coming together for knowledge, and if you can find a way to make the pursuit of knowledge and science more accessible to every people, I think you'll have done very well.
Muchas gracias, doctor Lucas Griffith. Bueno, agradecemos nuevamente esta muy interesante presentación y el tiempo que ha compartido con nosotros el doctor Lucas Griffith. Y con estas consultas respondidas hemos llegado al final de la actividad Desarrollo de Campus Universitario en el siglo XXI, iniciativa que se enmarca en el Plan Maestro de nuestro campus y que busca aportar una nueva mirada sobre el concepto de ciudad universitaria. Asimismo, damos las gracias al director de campus, el doctor Pedro Pablo Rojas García, y al doctor Leonel Pérez Bustamante, decano de la Facultad de Arquitectura, Urbanismo y Geografía de nuestra universidad, por acompañarnos en esta actividad. Invitamos a quienes quieran realizar preguntas al doctor Lucas o consultar sobre el proyecto de Plan Maestro de nuestro campus, pueden escribirlas al correo planmchillan@udec.cl. También les invitamos a visitar el sitio web planmaestrochillan.udec.cl. Agradecemos que nos hayan acompañado en esta jornada. Hasta pronto.